My name is Alira, and I'll never forget the way they laughed that night. Not because it was loud, it wasn't. Not even because it was cruel, not directly. It was the kind of laughter that wraps itself in charm and casualness, dressed up in candlelight and wine, while something underneath it slices straight through you. It honestly feels like a gilded cage sometimes. My husband Finn's voice rang out, smooth and amused, as he toasted the glasses around him. A beautiful prison, but a prison still. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. I sat right beside him, close enough that the edge of his blazer grazed my bare arm. Yet in that moment, I might as well have been across the city. I watched his words ripple around the table, met with a mix of chuckles and sympathetic nods from his friends. "I mean, come on," said his coworker Micah. "You married the most organized woman in the state. That's gotta feel like living inside a spreadsheet." More laughter. Finn just smiled, didn't disagree. And I smiled too, like I'd practiced in the mirror, like I hadn't just heard my entire marriage described as some kind of sentence. Neat, confining, void of spontaneity. I wanted to scream, but screaming doesn't fit into champagne-drenched evenings with corporate friends and curated playlists. So instead, I passed the bread. That night wasn't the first time he'd made a comment like that, but it was the first time he said it that clearly, that proudly, and in public. He'd joked before, called me taskmaster, teased me for my planner addiction, rolled his eyes when I reminded him about appointments or deadlines or doctor's visits. But a prison, that was new. That wasn't teasing. That was a truth wrapped in a joke. The kind that slips out only when someone feels entirely safe, saying the quiet part out loud. Back at home, he fell asleep quickly, unbothered, dreaming peacefully. I, on the other hand, lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, while my heart quietly packed away every compromise I had made in this relationship. The apartment, his pick, the job I turned down because he didn't want to relocate. The family visits, always his side, always his schedule. The 5 years of unpaid emotional labor I poured into keeping us functioning, while he reset through hobbies and golf trips with guys I couldn't name. He'd always been the charming one, the spontaneous one, the likable one. I had been the safe choice, the structure, the plan. And somewhere along the way, he had decided that made me the warden in his metaphorical jail. The next morning, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I brewed our coffee as usual, kissed him on the cheek like nothing had changed. But inside me, something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something far quieter. A kind of resignation that didn't collapse, but crystallized. A quiet knowing that I had been living in a performance, and I had been cast in a role I never auditioned for. He didn't need to say more. He'd said enough. So I made a decision, not to argue, not to plead, not to explain myself one more time. If this was a prison, I would be the one walking out of it. But not without setting the terms first. That was the beginning. The beginning of the end. Or the beginning of the truth. Depending on how you look at it. Either way, I'd finally stopped ignoring the sound of my own thoughts. Have you ever smiled through a conversation that broke something inside you? In the days that followed, I didn't change everything. I changed one thing. I stopped apologizing for existing, for speaking, for reminding him about the cable bill, for asking if he'd call his mom back, for not being fun after working a 12-hour day at a company I co-founded and carried on my back through 2 major pivots. I started letting silence speak for me. Finn noticed. He was used to the version of me that filled the gaps. In conversation, in logistics, in effort. He didn't quite know what to do with the version that didn't bend to soften the silence. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night while I was folding laundry, his voice unusually careful. "Everything's fine," I said. And technically, it was. If fine meant functioning without flinching. But I could feel the shifting air currents around us, and so could he. Because when a woman stops cushioning her words, it makes people nervous. At first, he thought it was a phase. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was hormonal. That was a favorite fallback of his. But when I passed up our usual Friday dinner plans with his friends and instead opted for a yoga class alone, something flickered behind his eyes, something uneasy. The next week, I did it again. Different excuse, same boundary. And then, without any ceremony, I did something that would have seemed minor to anyone else. But for me, it was seismic. I changed the password to my personal savings account. It used to be something like, "Us Always 2020. One of those hopelessly optimistic phrases you create when you still think love can outpace imbalance. Now, something simpler, something private, something mine. Finn had never asked for access, but he always assumed he'd have it. The way he assumed I'd pick up after his unspoken messes or cancel my deadlines when he needed a break from adulting. It was a quiet reclaiming, no fireworks, no confrontation. But that password change marked a shift in my spine, my body language, my presence in the room. I wasn't preparing to leave yet, but I was preparing to stop shrinking. And that, I think, disturbed him more than if I had screamed. That week, he came home with flowers, unprompted. "Just wanted to say thank you," he said, "for always being the one who keeps us grounded." I nodded, took the flowers, placed them in the kitchen. Not coldly, just clearly. He thought this was a turning point, that his recognition was a resolution. It wasn't. It was a receipt, evidence that he knew what I gave and still treated it like wallpaper. A few days later, I noticed his old travel bag sitting by the door. "Micah invited me to Tahoe for the weekend," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Just the guys. You okay holding down the fort?" The phrasing was almost laughable. I wasn't holding down a fort. I was the fort. And this sudden craving for space and adventure and guys being guys, it wasn't a surprise. It was a pattern. And now I was watching it from the outside, like someone who'd finally put her name on the guest list of her own life. "Sure," I said simply. He blinked. "No guilt trip? No passive-aggressive sighs?" "No," I said. "Enjoy." He left Friday morning. By Friday evening, I had reread our prenup 3 times and highlighted the clauses most people skim over: the asset separation guidelines, the business revenue exclusions, the residency timeline triggers. You see, I wasn't planning to leave in a blaze. I was planning to walk out of a locked room with the keys I'd hidden from myself. I pulled up the financial statements, cross-checked dates, tallied up our shared expenses, and started outlining what had actually been shared and what I had shouldered quietly while he built the illusion of equality. My name was on the mortgage, so was his, but only one of us had covered 80% of the payments since year 2. Our vacations, my American Express, groceries, my debit card, emergency vet bill for the dog he insisted we get and never walked, my rainy day fund. Love hadn't been absent from our marriage. That would have been easier. No, it was debt by 1,000 exceptions. A ledger of compromises that only I seemed to remember. Around midnight, I opened my work laptop. I wasn't behind on anything, but I needed to feel the world I had built without him. My other home, the startup I had launched with 2 friends, now a fast-growing biotech firm, self-sustaining, and 5 months from Series B. He never really asked about it. "Your little company," he used to say, with a smirk that wasn't exactly mocking, just dismissive enough to sting. That night, I looked at our latest performance dashboard, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't need him. Not emotionally, not financially, not legally. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Not for divorce papers, not yet, but for clarity. And what she gave me was better than any reassurance. She gave me leverage. Ever taken inventory of a relationship and realized you were the only one doing the accounting? The thing about clarity is, it doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for a quiet moment, or a conversation, or a therapist's couch. It arrives, unannounced, unbothered, while you're pouring coffee at 6:43 a.m., and the bank notifies you of a charge you didn't make. $1,328.17 at Sequoia Spa and Wellness Retreat. in Sonoma. I stood still, the kettle whistling behind me. Finn wasn't home yet from his guys' weekend. And this wasn't an accident. He had mentioned a retreat once, months ago. Said Micah's girlfriend raved about it. I thought nothing of it. We weren't spa people, or at least I wasn't. Apparently, Finn had become one. I didn't react. I didn't scream, or cry, or send an all-caps text asking who exactly rubbed eucalyptus oil on his shoulders while I was budgeting our quarterly payroll. Instead, I logged into our shared account, the one we barely used anymore, but which still carried both our names. The charge was linked to his card. Mine hadn't seen the inside of that spa, but our account had. For years, I had absorbed expenses, quietly, efficiently. Things like, "we'll even it out later," or "you're better with numbers anyway," became the script. And I played my role like it was gospel. But something about this charge, this carelessness, made my ribs tighten. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. Not under cash, not on a personal card. Just right there, waiting for me to see. And I did. When he walked through the door, Sunday night, duffel slung over one shoulder, and hair still faintly damp from the sauna he swore he didn't have time for, I was sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, documents neatly stacked. He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. "Trip was solid," he said, pulling a protein bar from the drawer. "Micah's girl booked us this amazing spa. You'd have loved it." I turned toward him, calm, focused, a stillness that came not from peace, but from preparation. "I saw the charge," I said. He blinked, then laughed lightly. "Oh, yeah, sorry I forgot to mention. They didn't split the payment right away, said it was easier if I just paid, and the others Venmo'd me." I nodded slowly. "Of course, you'll forward me the receipts then." His jaw flexed, just for a second, but I saw it. "Yeah, I mean, I'll have to ask them. I didn't keep track." He poured himself a drink. Back still turned to me. That's when I said it. "I canceled the joint card." Silence. He turned. "What?" "I canceled it. Or rather, I requested a separation of credit lines. We'll each receive our statements individually now. Clean split." His eyes narrowed. "Are you trying to say something?" "I'm saying I don't want your habits affecting my credit score." There it was again. That flicker of indignation, masked as confusion. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said softly. "I'm being precise." For the next several days, the tension didn't explode. It simmered. He cooked dinner twice, rare, even set the table, lit candles. One night, he offered to go over a real budget together, like we hadn't spent 5 years pretending he didn't know how to open an Excel sheet. But it wasn't the gestures I noticed. It was the fear behind them. Finn had never seen me detach, not like this. Because when a woman detaches quietly, when she no longer argues, no longer pleads, no longer bothers to explain, she becomes unknowable. And men like him? They don't handle unknowable well. He started snooping. I saw the recent tabs in my browser history move. My journal had been shifted slightly on the nightstand. Once, I found his phone on the kitchen counter with my Slack messages open, under the pretense that he was checking the weather. I didn't say a word, because the more he scrambled for control, the clearer it became. He knew something had changed, and he was right. But what he didn't realize, what he never could realize, was that the real change wasn't in my habits. It was in my loyalty, not to him, not anymore, to myself, to the version of me that had postponed dreams, delayed promotions, softened her voice, and shrunken her power until the shape of our marriage fit around his ego. The real turn came the night I got an unexpected call from a contact in Austin, a venture firm I had casually pitched 6 months ago. More of a brainstorm session than a pitch. Wanted to talk about funding. Series B. Serious numbers. "Your product's maturing fast," they said. "And we've noticed your name's leading more of the narrative now. That intentional?" I smiled, even though they couldn't see it. "Yes," I said. "That's intentional." I flew to Austin the following week, alone. Didn't tell Finn. didn't leave a note. Just arranged the meetings, booked the flight, packed a carry-on with enough confidence to burn bridges if I had to. And when I returned, I had something better than power. I had options. Ever realize someone only values you when they sense you're slipping away? The morning after, I quietly closed the final joint account. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the living room window. The place was still, unnervingly so. No morning chaos, no misplaced towels, no perfume clouding the hallway, or complaints about me leaving dishes too long in the sink. Silence had become a companion, and for the first time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like breathing again. The strange part wasn't how empty the house felt. It was how clear my own mind had become. I started hearing myself think again. My actual voice, not the softened, half-apologetic one I had developed to keep peace in a marriage that only survived through my compromise. That week, I received an email from HR about the upcoming leadership retreat. 3 days in a mountain lodge, off-grid, full of workshops and team bonding. It used to be the kind of thing I'd decline out of guilt or obligation. But this time, I clicked accept without hesitation. I wouldn't ask for permission or weigh the emotional fallout. I didn't need to. It felt strange to pack a weekend bag without checking in. No long explanation about who would water the plants or how I'd make it up when I got back. Just me, a rental car, and a playlist I hadn't touched since the early days of our relationship. The version of me that once dreamed of solo hikes and spontaneous road trips before I was told I was selfish for needing space. At the retreat, people noticed. "You seem lighter," my colleague Jen said, during a break between sessions. "Are you okay?" I smiled, genuinely. "I think I'm getting there." Later that night, after a fireside group chat dissolved into smaller conversations, I wandered out to the edge of the woods. The stars blinked quietly above the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. That's when the text came, a single message from Tyler. "Hey, you've been really quiet lately. Are we okay?" The irony nearly made me laugh. After months of him zoning out of conversations and brushing off my concerns with passive, "we'll figure it out," he suddenly noticed silence. I stared at the message for a while before locking the screen. No reply. No need. When I got back Sunday evening, the house was dim and smelled faintly of dust. His shoes were by the door. He was back early from his trip to visit his sister. I walked in calmly, placed my keys on the table, and found him sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine he never really read. "You've been distant," he said without looking up. "Is something going on?" I sat opposite him and took my time answering. "A lot's going on, but I'm not sure if you actually want to hear about it, or if this is just one of those conversations where I talk and you wait for your turn to defend yourself." He scoffed. "What does that even mean?" I didn't respond. Silence is a form of clarity, and that silence carried every moment he had dismissed my emotions like they were irrational detours from his narrative. He shifted uncomfortably and set the magazine down. "I'm trying, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Trying what?" "To make this work. You've just been cold." My eyes scanned his face. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was confused, because this was the moment the power imbalance shifted, and he couldn't find the lines of the script anymore. The next few days passed quietly, but the atmosphere in the house changed. He became overly helpful, doing the laundry, bringing home takeout, even offering to clean out the garage. But it wasn't remorse. It was fear. Not of losing me, but of losing the life I held together while he coasted. Then Thursday night came. I walked into the bedroom and found the corner drawer, the one where I kept tax documents and warranty files, opened. My folders were shuffled, a few papers out of place. I paused in the doorway. "Looking for something?" He turned around, startled. "No, just trying to find the manual for the Wi-Fi. It's been acting weird." Lies, smooth and immediate. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. That night, I moved my key financial files to a secure drive. I ordered a lockbox for my personal documents and changed the passwords to my accounts. And when I saw him glancing at my laptop screen later, I closed it without a word. Something had shifted in him, too. He could feel the ground shifting, and instead of asking why, he started reaching for control. Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon. His apology language. He greeted me with too much cheer, poured my coffee without asking, and mentioned offhandedly that he'd invited his friends over for game night. It was a test. He wanted to see if I'd push back, if I'd snap back into the agreeable wife who made space for his social life while erasing her own. "I won't be home tonight," I said simply. He blinked. "Oh, work?" "No." He didn't ask for details, and I didn't give any. Instead, I spent that evening in a quiet bar downtown with a notebook and a glass of red wine. I wasn't there to meet anyone. I was there to be alone with my thoughts, somewhere he couldn't interrupt. When I returned after midnight, the house was dark. I could hear him breathing heavily from the bedroom. Fake sleep. He was waiting for me to explain where I'd been. I didn't. The next morning, I found the living room spotless, the laundry folded, and a bouquet of peonies on the kitchen counter. There was a note. "I miss us. Let's talk." I read it once and tossed it in the recycling bin. Because us was never mutual. Us was just me, stretched thin. Ever had someone try to win you back just to keep you from walking away? Not because they truly changed. It began with a forgotten password. Tyler messaged me while I was at work, casually asking for the login to our shared streaming service, one I hadn't used in weeks. I paused before replying. Something in me hesitated, not because of the request itself, but because I realized I didn't even remember the password either. He'd changed it, without telling me. That small detail shouldn't have meant anything, but in the growing distance between us, it became symbolic. A quiet rewriting of boundaries, or maybe a test. I responded with a neutral, "I think you updated it last. Try the last one we used." No reply. By that weekend, I noticed other changes. The grocery bills had gone up, by quite a bit. Things I never ate were piling up in the fridge. Expensive meat cuts, overpriced wines, even imported cheese. It wasn't about taste, it was display. Like he was prepping to host someone, or prove something. Then came the conversations he didn't mean for me to overhear. He'd started taking more calls outside, on the balcony, in the car, even once from the laundry room with the door closed. I didn't eavesdrop, but I didn't have to. Voices carry, and even muffled. I could hear the performance, the low laugh, the exaggerated pauses, the overly charming tone, reserved for people who weren't me. One night, I caught a name slip through the cracked patio door. Layla. He laughed after saying it, too quickly, too loudly, like he was trying to cover up that he'd said it at all. I didn't react, not then. I just noted it, filed it away in the quiet part of my mind that had grown sharper since I stopped living in denial. A few days later, I decided to take an early lunch and head home. I told my office I wasn't feeling well, a half-truth, maybe, but justifiable. What I was really feeling was suspicion, not paranoia, just intuition that had been waiting too long to be acknowledged. The apartment was quiet when I opened the door. His car wasn't in the garage, but his shoes were by the door. The hallway smelled like something sweet and foreign, like a perfume I didn't own. The sliding door to the balcony was ajar, curtain moving gently in the breeze. I walked slowly, quietly. Not sneaking, but deliberate, like a woman stepping into her own truth. The living room was empty, but the kitchen table held evidence. A second coffee cup, a lipstick ring in soft coral, not my shade, a sugar packet I never used, and beside it all, a pair of sunglasses I didn't recognize. I didn't take photos. I didn't scream. I didn't even touch them. I just stood there, looking at the still life of betrayal laid out like a careless gallery. Then I turned around and walked back out. Back at the office, I opened a new folder in my cloud drive, labeled it simply documentation. I uploaded everything I had already compiled: bank statements, emails, screenshots of his late-night search history, and now mental notes of what I had seen. I wasn't building a case for revenge. I was building clarity. The next day, he noticed the shift. He came home with takeout from my favorite Thai place, acting as if the air wasn't thick with unspoken things. "You okay?" he asked while setting down the food. "You've been quiet." "I'm fine," I said, and meant it in the way people say fine when they know everything is not fine. But they're too composed to say more. That night, I watched him sleep. There's a strange sort of grief that comes when you realize someone you once trusted now lives in the same space as a stranger. You start to count the lies not by number, but by tone. The way their voice changes, the slight pause before they answer, the way their eyes dart away when you hold their gaze too long. I could have confronted him, could have exploded, could have laid out the evidence and demanded answers. But I didn't want answers anymore. I wanted escape, freedom, peace. So I made my next move. I contacted the realtor who had once helped us find the apartment, asked for a private listing evaluation, strictly confidential. I told her I was considering changes. She didn't ask questions. Professionals like her never do. 2 days later, she confirmed the estimate. The market was good, better than good. If we sold now, I could walk away with a clean split and more than enough to start over. The only variable was him. That night, he made an offhand comment about us, maybe doing a trip to Mexico this fall. I smiled. "We'll see." Because there would be no fall trip, no romantic getaway, no sudden teary reconciliation. I'd already begun mentally packing. Ever reached the point where silence was louder than any confrontation? I didn't slam the door on my way out. That would have implied I was angry, that I wanted him to hear it, that I needed him to know I was leaving. But when I finally packed my things, just 2 suitcases, a locked hard drive, and 1 folder of documents, I left the key in a plain envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, right beside the coffee cup he'd left for me that morning. He still thought I'd be back that night, but I had already checked into a long-stay suite across town. The kind with a kitchenette, white towels too stiff to feel like home, and peace so loud it nearly echoed. That first night alone, I didn't cry. I made tea, opened my laptop, and pulled up the rental agreement for a workspace I'd found earlier that week. It wasn't fancy, just a converted floor in a shared office building, but it had light, quiet, and a lock that only I held the key to. Within a week, I'd moved the LLC paperwork out of our shared files, transferred what I needed, secured accounts, updated passwords. I had founded that business, I had built it, and no matter what Tyler said in the future, nothing on paper or in code belonged to him. He didn't reach out right away. I had expected some version of a dramatic call, a demand for explanation, a confrontation laced with guilt. But when it came, it was quieter than I imagined. A single message, mid-morning on a Wednesday. "Where are you?" I stared at it, then closed the screen. 3 hours later, "Are you okay?" Another hour passed. "You could have said something." That one almost made me laugh. As if I hadn't been saying something for years. As if silence hadn't become our native language, spoken fluently through avoidance, withdrawal, and carefully timed absences. I never replied. He didn't deserve closure. He deserved consequences. It wasn't until my attorney sent him the separation agreement that he called me. Twice. Then 3 more times in the span of 2 hours. Eventually, he left a voicemail. "Listen, I know things have been rough, but isn't this a little extreme? You're just walking away from everything?" I saved it but didn't respond. And I didn't need to, because that was the point. I wasn't walking away from everything. I was walking away from him. A month later, I sold my half of the apartment and reinvested it into the company I had put on hold for too long. I redesigned our brand identity. Clean, minimal, assertive, just like I was learning to be. I hired 2 new team members, both women. One was a single mom rebuilding after her own divorce. The other had just left a toxic corporate job that drained her daily. We worked late some nights, fueled by bad coffee and better conversation. They didn't know the full story, but they could feel something in the way I carried myself, like a woman who had gone to war quietly and returned not broken, but forged. The final paperwork came in the mail on a Tuesday. No handwritten notes, no parting words, just black ink and legality. I signed, sent it back, and stood by the window for a long time, watching the late spring sunlight stretch across the city. There was no celebration, no music, just the sound of my own breath, steady and strong. Tyler never fought the terms. Maybe he was ashamed. Or maybe he finally understood that I hadn't left out of spite, but out of self-respect. He kept the coffee machine. I kept my company. We called it even. Months passed. Eventually, a mutual acquaintance mentioned that Tyler was seeing someone new. Layla, I assumed, or someone else entirely. Either way, I didn't flinch, because by then, I had grown so far beyond needing updates. I was building a life no longer shaped by someone else's dissatisfaction. I started running again. I called my mother more. I stopped apologizing for ordering takeout 3 nights in a row. Freedom didn't look like fireworks or payback. It looked like mornings that didn't start with dread, and nights that ended with stillness instead of strategy. One night, months later, I opened my email and saw a message from a name I hadn't read in a while. Tyler, subject line, no expectations. I hovered for a moment, then opened it. Just a few lines. I don't know what I thought marriage was supposed to feel like, but I know now it shouldn't have felt like we were opponents. I hope you're doing well, that's all. I read it twice, then archived it. No anger, no reply. I didn't need to prove I was doing well. I just needed to keep being well. Looking back, I didn't just walk away from a man. I walked away from the version of myself that thought enduring disrespect was the price of love. Real freedom came the moment I stopped trying to be enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't. If you're in a place where you're shrinking just to keep the peace, ask yourself, what would life look like if you chose peace within instead? If this story resonated with you, leave a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe in stories that restore self-worth, don't forget to subscribe for more. Your voice matters here.